Hello there. This is the last video that we originally planned for the series, where we will implement the game over logic, and we will also allow the players to play again. We will show a message once a player wins to let the player know that they can play again by hitting the enter key. Let's start by binding the key to an action. So let's go to the input file that we have here, game input file, and we'll need a new action, a new key trigger. We're going to be using the enter key as we mentioned, so let's go ahead and search for that. Cool, and the action, we're going to call it start_game. Cool, let's make sure we save it. Next, we will add a text node to our GUI. That's where we will display the game over message. So let's go ahead and open that up. Okay, so we'll need a new text node. Let's go ahead and add that right away. And we'll call this game_over, just like that. As for the position, we want it to be in the middle of the screen. So that would be 640 for the x-axis and 320 for the y-axis. So let's go ahead, that looks perfect. We're gonna delete the default text. So we're gonna be setting it in code because we wanna show which of the players won, if either the left one or the right one. So we will do that through code dynamically. Okay, we also need to set the font. Remember, it's not gonna work otherwise, so we're gonna be using the score font as well. It's gonna work for us. If we wanted a different size, we would have to go ahead and create another font, but this will work for us. And finally, we'll also disable it by taking off the enabled property. This is because we only wanna show it when the game is over. Now, for the logic, we will send two new messages from the controller to the GUI. We need to signal or send a message once the game is over, but also, as we mentioned, we also want to allow the player to start the game again. So we also will need a message for that. Let's start from the GUI script. So let's go ahead and open that up. Let's make sure we save the GUI file here as well. Okay, so once we're in the GUI script, we're gonna start by adding the new messages. So as we said, we'll have one for the game over logic. So yep, so this function and game over. And the other one we mentioned is the start game. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just gonna replace this. There we go. Okay, now we actually need to check for these messages, right? So we have some more messages here. I'm gonna actually just go ahead and copy this branch and add both if statements here. So one's for the game over, and we'll have a second for start game. There we go. So let's handle the game over logic first. Once the game is over, so what do we want to do, right? So we said that we want to display the game over message. So let's start by doing basically what we did here. It's very similar. So we'll need to grab a node, right? So let's just copy this over. Actually, let's just bring this over here. Oops. Let's copy, not cut. Okay, so we're gonna be using a different kind of animation. So for now, I'll just get rid of this. The other two things we'll need. So the ID here, right? We named the text node game_over. And for the text, we'll actually just hard code it here. As we said, we want to specify who the winner was. And we're going to access it like this, message.winner. So we need to make sure that's being passed. And let's just say has won. As mentioned, we want to allow the players to play again. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a second line here. And we're gonna do that by adding a /n. Let's go ahead and add just two for, there's just some space in there. And then we're gonna say press enter to play again. And there we go. Okay, so next we're gonna be adding a slightly more advanced animation. It's not too advanced, just a bit different from the other one we have above. So let's go ahead and let's actually just copy it and then we can change the properties. We're not going to be changing the W. So instead, what we want here is we just want the text to grow a little bit and then shrink back to the original size, something like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to be using the scale property. So there is actually a constant for that. I believe it's prop scale. Yes, there we go. Right, and the prop scale is an actual vector, so we can replace the 0 here and just create a new vector. So vector 4. And because we want all the axes to grow in the same proportions, we're just gonna be adding it here. So just call it S, and this, which we are like about 4%, right? This is what we want. So not a huge increase, just slightly, a slight animation. So as mentioned, it's showing properties, and we're not using the fourth axis, so we're just gonna set it to 0. Using linear is okay. That's gonna work for us. We want, as we said, it's a very small increase in size, but we also want it to happen in a relatively long time frame, let's say. We can start with 3 seconds and see how it feels. Again, play around with it. This is all yours. So, yeah, no delay, no callback. And instead of playback once, ping pong, we're gonna be using playback loop ping pong. So what that means is that it's just an animation that doesn't stop, right? It's gonna be animating forever in a ping pong fashion. So it's gonna go to the value we have it here, and it's gonna come back down to the original one. And because it's a loop, it's just gonna keep doing that forever. Cool. So yeah, animating the GUIs and the game objects in Defold is quite simple. And with very simple code, you can end up with a pretty good looking UI and just game overall. Okay, now we need to handle the start game logic. So once we've shown this text, right? We're expecting the player to press enter. Oh, and I just noticed there's a typo here, so let's fix that. There we go. So once we show the game over text, we're gonna be listening for the enter, and this will happen in the controller. The controller will send the start game option just so we can reset the GUI, right? So what that means is that we have 3 elements in the GUI that we need to reset or update. So we've got the 2 scores, which will one at 0, right? The game's starting again. But also we want to disable the game over message, right? There's a new game, so it's not over. So let's go ahead and do that. We can grab the node again. We're gonna be using this node for that. We have the update score function already, so we're gonna be using that for the scores. I'll just copy and paste this for now. Okay, so how we can disable this is the GUI has a bunch of like setters and getters. We can use that to set the enabled. So the node, it's called node, and enabled, we're gonna set it to false. It's basically what we did in the GUI, in the default editor, but we're doing it through code. Okay, and as we mentioned, we're gonna be calling update score, like both of them. So let's just go ahead and copy this actually. It's gonna be much easier. Once we do this, we can hard code the 0. We could have this as part of the message, but let's go for the simpler option for now. Okay, and with that, we're done with the GUI. Let's go ahead and move to the actual controller. Let's start by adding the messages and a constant for the max score players need to achieve. So again, we are going to be needing these messages. Let's go ahead and bring them over. Again, if you want, place them in a centralized place. That's the best practice. I mean, we could do another video on modules if you want. Let us know in the comments if that's something you would be interested in. As mentioned, we will need to listen to the enter key. For us to be able to handle, to listen to input in this specific controller, we need to do something. We need to post a message to the game object itself. Let's go ahead, and we're going to be doing that in the init function between these values here. So a message to itself, where the receiver is going to be dot. And we need to tell the game object that we want to acquire input focus. So this is the one. With this and as a string, of course. We're telling the game object we need to receive input. Okay, before we move along, let's also add a constant for the max score, right? We want the game to be over at some point, and we're gonna be deciding that with a max score constant for now. let's go ahead and add that here, and we can set it to 5. Just a tip, once you are developing your games, be mindful of these values that you use, because for testing purposes, lower values are usually better, so you have a faster feedback loop. If you're interested in learning a bit more about the acquire input focus bit that we just added to the code, we're going to leave a link in the description below. Next, as we discussed, and because we are also acquiring input, we need to handle input, right? So we don't have the onInput function here. Let me just minimize these things for now. There we go. We need the onInput function, so we don't have it. Let's start by adding that back again. Let's see, do we get auto completion? Yes, we do. Awesome. There we go. Let's just add the end keyword here. Just like the onMessage function, we can get any sort of input from the user, right, from the player. So let's go ahead and check that we're receiving the one we're expecting. So this is action ID. If it's the start game, right, that's the one we configured. Let's go ahead, and it seems like the autocomplete is going a bit crazy. Let's see if by adding a bit more space. Okay, just 1 second. Okay, so yeah, if the action ID is the start game, then this is where we start doing things. Okay, first things first, it's always good to think about edge cases, right? So users can press the enter key at any point. So we need to be very careful as when we're handling this, right? So we only want to listen or handle, more like, well, we only want to handle the enter key once we're in the game over state. Now, we don't have any states for game over yet, but let's go ahead and just add the check. We can initialize it later. Or by default, it's going to be false, so we don't, because it's nil, it's going to be nil, so we don't really need to initialize it either, but let's start like this. So if, for example, if that game is not over, then we just want to ignore it, right? This is one of the ways that we could accomplish that. And as mentioned, this doesn't exist yet. It's going to be false by default, which is what we want. Now, after this check, we need to do 2 things. The first one is we want to reinitialize some of the variables in the game, in the self object there. And second, we need to post the start game message to the GUI so it can actually handle it, right? So let's start with the latter. Let's start by just posting the message. We already know that this is GUI hashtag main, right? Okay, the auto completion is going crazy. So right, so we're gonna be sending the start game. Now, as we said, we need to reinitialize some of the variables, but because we're also doing it in the init function, we're gonna go ahead and create a helper function to do this. Okay, let's go ahead and add that right below the spawn ball. We need to declare this before it's used. Just go ahead and call it initialize. Initialize underscore game. And it's going to take self because that's where we're storing the variables. Right, so this is basically what we want. This is what we want to be doing. Once every time we start the game, this is what we need to do. We're also using the game over flag, right? So let's take this time to actually create it. So the game, once you start the game is not over. Okay, so let's not forget to call it. That would be something, a classic thing I would do. Let's go ahead and also copy this, and yeah, we need to call it here as well. So what we're doing here is whenever we receive the start game action, which is configured to be triggered with the enter key, once the game is over, we're going to be creating a new game and letting the GUI know so it can also initialize itself. Last, we need to check whether the game is over, right? We're not setting the game over flag to true at any point, so we need to be handling that. And that happens once any of the players reach the max score. Let's start by creating a helper function to handle the logic. Let's go ahead and create it right above the onMessage. I'm going to create a new local function again. We're going to call this check underscore game over underscore over. We're going to need the self. That's just to avoid passing all the variables. And because we're also going to be setting the flag as true, as we said. Let's just pass in the self. We also need to specify who called this. This will become a bit more clear in a bit, because this is what we'll use to check for each side, and we're abstracting it away. So it's gonna make more sense in a bit. Here what we want is to check the scores to see if they're actually equal or greater than the max score. So we can start with the left one, for example. Doesn't really matter. Well, so if the left score is greater than or equals the max score, then that means the game is over. But we also want to check for the right one. So if either one of them is greater or equal than the max score, not max, there we go. So here we know that the game is over. This is where we grab the flag. Is no completion, so is game over. Then now it's gonna be true. We also need to let the GUI know, so it handles this state itself. So can actually just love copying and pasting. So just carefully, let's bring this over here. And instead of start game, it's just gonna be like game over, right? Like the other state we have. And because this is a check, we'll return true if the game is over. Oops, not here. And we're just gonna return false if it's not over. This time, this way we'll know what the function did. Now all we need to do is actually call it. So as we said, like right after we update the scores, that's when we want to do it. Right here. So and then we check. So this is why we need to tell the winner, right? This is the branch to check for the left player. This is the right player. So here we would specify left player, and we're missing something, right? As if we go to the GUI, we're expecting a winner here, and that's what we're actually passing here. So we need to send an object here with the actual winner, right? So winner equals winner. Here this is what we want, so it's just actually the text, right? Okay, so if the game is over, then once the game is over, we don't want to be doing anything else. So we're just gonna return. It's gonna be exactly the same for the right player. Obviously, instead of left player, just right player. Okay, it's time to test what we've done, and hopefully this will happen. I'm gonna speed this up because it's gonna take a while because of the randomness. Oops, and again, something's missing, so let's go ahead and check that out. Right, and of course they missed something, right? If we go to the GUI, we check the game over text node, we disable it, right? So it's gonna be disabled. We're not enabling it anywhere. So the place we wanna enable it is once we get the game over message. So let's go ahead and just do the opposite here. And instead of false, it's gonna be true. And this hopefully should do it. Let's go ahead and test. Again, I'm gonna speed this up. And there we go. The left player has 1, so it works, right? This is the one that has 5. And let's see presenter, and whoa, yes. Awesome. Well, this is it for this video. I'm very thankful if you've made it this far. This is my very first tutorial series, and of course there are more to come, so stay tuned. Please like and subscribe, because this will help me reach more fellow game developers and just continuously keep improving content for you guys. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.